not what she's having.
Hi, welcome to Our Better Half podcast, episode 4, January 31st, 2016. I'm Laura Collins Lister-Mensch, a middle-aged tap dancing enthusiast and sapiosexual. That means I'm attracted to intelligence, but you probably already knew that. Today, we're going to learn about male midlife crises and the role of improv in the bedroom. We'll sing a Kegel song with a vulvulationary. We'll learn about unicorns from Carrie when she explains them to Grandma Lisa. And a very important security issue from our Italian friends.
1, we're going to get old. 2, eventually it's going to suck. 3, tough rocks. We're going to have to learn to enjoy our lives until we can't anymore.
Do you know a mid-man? That's stand-up comic Steve Oakes' shorthand for male midlife crises. He survived his own such crisis and returned with a quip-filled report and advice in his latest funny book, Mid-Men, The Modern Man's Guide to Surviving Midlife Crisis. Click on his Amazon author page linked on this podcast's show notes at ourbetterhalf.net. If you want a face with the voice, and you will, watch the marvelous newsreel video. I laughed a lot through the whole book, and since you are right now listening to my midlife crisis, I thought you might want to meet him, and I recently gave him a call. Hello, Steve.
Hello, Laura.
When you were a kid, did you dream of growing up to have a midlife crisis?
I don't think any kid grows up expecting to have a midlife crisis. In fact, I don't think kids grow up expecting to grow up. I think we remain immortal right up until the midlife crisis. And at that point, our immortality is taken from us and we suddenly comprehend the specter of death hanging on us.
Eek, yes. So what is a mid-man?
What is a mid-man? A mid-man is either a boomer or a Gen X guy who has kind of reached that point. He's reached that point in his life where he has fewer years ahead of him than he does behind him. And he acknowledges that. And he goes, this death thing isn't playing with me. I'm actually eventually really going to die. And that's my theory is that's when the real panic sets in.
And you're set in when?
47 years old.
What happened?
April 3rd, 3 p.m. No, I'm kidding. I don't actually have that much detail. My back went out. I was riding a bike and my back went out and I felt very fallible. Well, I felt pain. There's nothing like pain. Pain is a great teacher all the way around. Nobody touches a hot iron twice, so not on purpose. So pain is a great teacher. And I just realized that I was fallible. And then I kind of expanded on that to not only am I fallible, I am absolutely mortal and I am really aging. And that was when it all kicked in.
You said that in your book that no two midlife crises are exactly alike. How's yours going?
Well, I think I'm past it, believe it or not. I don't think I'm experiencing a midlife crisis any longer. I am still aware of my mortality, and I definitely think it panics me every now and again. But the oppressive, gigantic freak out has abated. Did
writing the book help?
Well, yes, it did. And what I did initially was I had a show. I did a one-man show. My background is stand-up comedy. I was a comic for about 15 years on the road. So, and I really missed it. But I was not ready to subject myself to the clubs or touring or cruise ships or any of the things. So I decided to get that experience back in my life. I would do this one-man show. And the only thing really that was motivating me to write was my own crisis. So I wrote about that and I went and did the show. And I think that helped me enormously. Writing the show and performing the show helped me enormously because it allowed me to take a third person view of my own personal crisis. What is very much a first person situation suddenly became a third person observation, which was very helpful.
The first sentence of your book is a joke. It's a joke about Viagra.
Yes.
Is midlife going to be different from now on with all the blue pills?
Yeah. And what's funny about that is that my friends and I are all, it has become such sort of a casual thing. to talk about. Like, I think when the drug first came out, I guess I was a little young to use it or even consider using it. But now I think the drug and my social circle have all matured to the point where it's really the stigma is totally removed.
And do you think that midlife is going to be different from now on?
For the next generation of midlife crisis sufferers?
Yeah. I mean, it strikes me that the generation before us didn't have the blue pills. We have them now. So are we just going to evolve differently from now on?
I don't think so. I don't think that you can reduce midlife crisis to penis function. And I am so sorry that I used the words reduce and penis in the same sentence. So that's only one aspect of the changes that take place over midlife crisis. There's also, can I ever retire? There's bills, there's kids, like people have kids later in life now. So I would say that it's probably as hard, if not harder, to have a midlife crisis now than it might have been maybe in the 50s, where our roles were so much more clearly delineated.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. So, and it has nothing to do with whether or not you can maintain an erection. That I don't think that's the big factor here. I don't think it hurts to be able to make one. I think it's good and everybody's happy about it. But I don't think that's the real fulcrum of balancing your life.
But it's changed conversation, and it's certainly changed humor.
Viagra?
Don't you think?
Well, it's probably produced more jokes than it has erections.
Oh. You spoke in the book about a principle called selfish selflessness when it comes to marriage. Tell us more.
Well, based on the nature of your show, we can take that into sex as well.
Yeah.
We find if somebody is gaining wisdom through their life, they're coming to the realization that, and this is kind of a karma thing in a way, but it's kind of George Costanza meets karma, in that we learn that if we put something out there, just you could take it down to like if we're hanging out in front of the TV and I'm rubbing my wife's foot, right? And I know that my foot is next, I'd be wise to do a good job.
Mm-hmm. And how does that work with sex?
She's not really into feet. Actually, it works. It works great. If I'm aware, if I'm tuned in, and this, I don't know what your next question is, but I almost want to ask it for you, just so I can answer it.
Do it.
If I'm remaining very connected and very aware through sex, well, then my chances of her being aware and giving me what I want is much greater. So my background before I got into stand-up was improvisation, and this is a fun way for your listeners to approach sex. The nature of improvisational sketch comedy, or sketches in general, I guess if they're not funny, they're still improv, is yes and. That's the basic rule of improv, is yes and be very aware and be very tuned in, be ready to add to whatever, figure out what direction things are moving in and continue to move them in that direction. So if I'm aware of what she's enjoying and I'm giving her lots of what she's enjoying, first of all, I'm doing a great job, which is always going to be good around the house. That's never going to be a bad thing. Mm-hmm. The second thing is she is going to be more apt to be attuned to me and provide me with what I'm looking for in that situation.
Yes, and. Okay.
Yes, and.
I love it.
Yeah, and think about it, like apply it in your mind to sex. I'll give you a moment.
Everyone's thinking that right now.
Exactly.
Well, speaking of libido.
Yes.
You describe two trends for libido: downward for men, upward for women, and this is in midlife. And you say, quote, "The horrifying, ironic good news is that mid-men have diminishing libido." Good news.
Well, yeah. And this goes back to a generational change as well. Inasmuch as women have an increase in libido in midlife, the current generation and this is, by the way, everything we're discussing here really pertains to Western society, because there's a lot of different ways to live on this planet, and it would be impossible to have what we're talking about here today, apply to every single civilization on the planet. So there is a certain Western society in which we live, and they are your likely listeners. So yes, while women are getting hornier, for lack of a better word, and guys are getting a little less horny, It kind of evens us out because guys came into it at so much higher level.
Well, I love that you describe marital happiness as a long-term U-curve, falling in midlife, rising later. And to quote you, you say that, and I love this line, marital satisfaction is often described as a long-term U-curve, but then so is Peyronie's disease.
Yes.
So how's your happiness graph at this age?
It is actually quite good. And for one thing, I don't have Peyronie's disease, which is always nice. Do you know that just for your listeners, that's a curvature of the penis?
Yes.
Just I don't want to leave people having to rush to their phone and try to look things up.
That'll be on the show notes without graphics. Yes.
Okay, good. But yeah, I think right now we understand each other. We've been together for 26 years. We understand each other very, very well. We know that there's things that the other person likes. We know in my particular case, my wife kind of needs to be surprised. This is where the improv thing comes in. I can't expect to be a successful lover with my wife and provide her with cookie cutter sex unless I use an actual cookie cutter.
We will not have that in the show notes at all.
No, no, it's not true. But I do have to surprise her. You know, I have to sort of approach from different directions to make everything work. Which is another big difference between men and women, by the way. Guys, we usually have an understanding of what it is that trips our trigger, and it's fairly easy. Do you remember the film Carnal Knowledge?
Yeah.
And do you remember that scene where it's Jack Nicholson and he's directing, I forgot who the actress is, through a sex act? She's a hooker, and he directs her through a sex act, and you don't know it. And it's sort of a ritual, and she has to hit every beat. And at one point she misses a beat, and he just goes off. He just freaks out because she messed up the ritual that he needed. That's a very man kind of thing, is that we have certain things that are going to trip our triggers. Where I think with women, and maybe I'm generalizing, and I shouldn't be, but I think with women, you really kind of have to surprise them a little bit to make any kind of headway.
And as we get older, do you think that changes?
No, I think it just becomes more difficult, because how many surprises can you continually find? And that goes back to the improv thing. You have to keep figuring out different ways to approach it.
I'm imagining now some sort of new sex retreat where you do improv and also the sex counseling. Sounds great.
That's brilliant. That's really a good idea, and that would improve people's sex lives immeasurably, especially if they've fallen into a rut.
Wow, improv. Okay, someone out there is going to come up with this now.
Well, I would like at least an invitation.
Okay. Well, and royalties, yes.
And well, you know what? You can't put once it gets legal, you can lose some friends. But just a common courtesy would be nice. That's all I'd ask.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, I'm sure we'll hear about that. You are going on stage to do stand-up after a hiatus. Is that right?
Yes, I'm now building. I'm sort of rewriting the previous show drastically, and it's going to be Mid-Men. It's going to be based on the book in terms of marketing, but very different from the book in terms of presentation.
And you faced a lot of live audiences and cameras. You faced Howard Stern, I understand.
Yes.
And can you say, keeping it PG, what it is that Richard Pryor said about your humor?
Yeah, he said, I was literally working with Pryor at the Comedy Store in Los Angeles, which Pryor's been my hero since I was old enough to understand who my hero should be. And I was opening for him, and it was surreal. It was a very surreal night. I ended up opening for him a few more times, but this is the first time. And I couldn't believe I was, never mind sharing the stage with the guy, I couldn't believe I was in the same room with Richard Pryor. And I had a set. I was in the original room, and it was a very strong 15 minutes. It went very well. And Pryor got up on stage, and I said to the audience, I said, I can't even believe that these words are coming out of my mouth, and there's going to be like a guy who's going to show up behind them and be those words. I was dizzy. And I bring him up, and as I'm getting off the stage, he doesn't let go of my hand. I shake his hand, and he doesn't let go, and he pulls me in and gets in my ear and says, you are one funny mother blanker.
Wow.
And I don't remember getting off the stage. I don't remember how I got to the back of the room. I could have been, like, literally, I was like walking unconscious. It was one of the peak moments of my life, certainly.
I can't imagine. That's amazing. And it leads me to this question.
Yeah.
So you've written about sexual ego having to do with a fear of death. And
Yeah.
what's scarier, the inevitability of death or a 70-minute stand-up set?
Oh, God, death.
Still scarier.
Yeah, well, you know what? Because I've put those two things together. I've died for 70 minutes on stage. No. I think an evening of comedy is, that's my briar patch. I have no problem with that.
I think for most people, it'd be the opposite.
The New York Times did a study years and years ago. I don't remember the exact year, and they were doing people's greatest fears. And I think death came in fourth, and having to speak to an audience came in first.
Wow. Well,
Yeah.
I was on the premise that the stand-up set might be equally or more frightening. I was going to ask you what's better for staving off fear of death, sex or stand-up?
Well, both of them actually, wow, you really hit something cool here, because they are both such Zen practices that fear of anything kind of leaves you. They're both, if done correctly, if you're on your performance, even if you're not actually, stand up and sex, to my experience, have both been so consuming in terms of attention and energy that there's no time to really think about anything else. Like you think about like somebody in an emergency, like Sully Sullenberg, landing that plane in the Hudson River. I'm gonna guess he wasn't thinking about his bills.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Some things just empty your brain. They're just so intense. They're so concentrated that you don't think about anything else. And I would say stand up and sex are two of those things.
Yeah. Do you have parting advice for other mid-men and those mid-women and mid-men who love them?
Yeah, well, if they're already being loved by a mid-woman, then they're already winning. And one of the other things in my book that I talk about is, if there's a woman in your life and she actually believes in you and loves you, make that work, because the absence of that is actually, and I put in the stats, it's actually deadly. It actually will shorten your life. So first things first, if you've already got that woman in your life, then congratulations, you're already way ahead of the game. But the things to remember are, women are, and I don't want to sound like, Mars and Venus here, but women are absolutely different organisms than we are. And we cannot try to project our MO onto them, assuming that they share it. It's different. So one of the last posts I put on the Mid-Men Facebook page, that mid-men are sort of dull. We can be dull. Middle-aged men can be driven by habit, and they can be driven by arcane concepts, and they're not that much fun. And if you stop for a moment thinking about what's good for me, the middle-aged man, and start thinking about, well, what impression am I leaving? What am I giving to somebody?
Mm-hmm.
How am I considering it? This goes back to that same thing about considering the other person. It's literally the same concept, which is be tuned in, be aware. Don't be selfish. Don't be dull. Don't allow yourself to maintain the habits that have kind of become your life, and make sure that you're remaining interesting. And this goes back to sex again. Relationships and sex, they're very similar in this regard. Make sure you continue to be surprising. Don't keep throwing down the same thing over and over again, whether it's sex or whether it's where you're eating or whether it's who you're hanging out with or whatever you're doing. Keep it interesting.
Wise words to end with. And I thank you very much. It's a really funny book. I recommend everyone go out and get it. It's got great quizzes and great wisdom and really good humor.
I'm sorry, I've totally forgotten the name of the book. I know that's ridiculous since I wrote it, but I'm sorry. What is it again?
I think it would be Mid-Men.
Mid-Men. Yeah, it's The Modern Man's Guide to Surviving Midlife Crisis, of course. How could I forget?
Exactly. And your one-man show will be at this year's Hollywood Fringe Festival in June. And the show notes will have links to all of these things.
Well, thank you so much for having me and taking the time to talk to me.
Thank you. Today for our Explain That to a Grandma segment, we have Carrie and Grandma Lisa. Hi.
Hi. So this one is definitely interesting. It's called a unicorn. And they're not referring necessarily to the mythical creature, but rather a a woman who's bisexual, which means she's attracted to both men and women. And she is joining an existing couple, and she will often become sexually involved with both partners. And then, but outside of sex, she won't demand anything or do anything that would cause problems to the couple. And I'm guessing it's called a unicorn because it's really hard to find someone who's willing to do that.
Okay. I've never heard the term, but, back in my day, it was just a threesome.
Yeah.
And from what you describe, it seems like a threesome.
Yeah.
I don't, I don't know. It's not something that interests me. But I'm all for whatever makes other people turn them on. It's okay with me.
Exactly. As long as everyone's okay with the arrangement, hey.
Yeah, listen. What I imagined was that it was that the third woman had some other fake organ attached, like the unicorns. The unicorn.
Yeah, there wasn't anything about I don't know if there. I mean, I guess she could wear a strap on, but it doesn't seem to be a requirement.
Right. No. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you both very, very much.
Thank you, Laura. I'm getting educated by the moment.
As I searched the internet for songs about Kegels, as one does, no one was more surprised than I was to find one. It's Do the Kegel by Laura Doe, and the person behind the song is as charming as the tune. I need you to visit the show notes for the links to Laura Doe's vulva puppets and pillows and educational music videos. She's an actor, educator, and vulvulationary. Come on and meet her. Good morning, Laura.
Good morning, Laura.
What did you dream of doing when you grew up?
I think when I was growing up, I wanted to be an actress.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that would have been probably the most exotic of my dreams.
And how old are you now?
I'm 56.
You call yourself a vulvulationary. Can you define that for us?
Absolutely. The vulvulation, in my definition, and I think it's my invention, is a celebration and revelation. It's a grassroots movement dedicated to celebrating and revealing the wonder of the vulva, the beauty, the mystery, and the reality of the structures within. So it's really, the vulvulation is removing the taboos and the silence and the lack of understanding of this incredible part of the body, and supporting both men and women to get connected and to start to celebrate and even almost revere, as they did in ancient times, this portal between the worlds, as it were.
Which brings us to the Yoniversity. Tell us about that.
I say yoni, although a lot of people say yoni. Yoni, as you may well know, is an ancient Sanskrit word, an ancient word from the Indian tantric traditions, which means actually the whole of a woman's reproductive system. So it's the vulva, the vagina, the womb, the ovaries, the whole kit and caboodle, as it were. And it's a very respectful, honoring name for this collection of structures which really make up our femininity in our bodily terms. And the other thing I love about that word is it has other names like gateway to the universe and cosmic entrance and source and many things that, make really give a sense of the the hugeness of the fact that a woman gives birth through these structures. So as part of my attempts to support the vulvulation, I'm an educator, and my education is done through the university or the university, because I'm also a firm believer in practical hands-on education, rather than just relying on a more sort of spiritual approach to sexuality, as in some tantric schools. So the university is kind of having a little laugh at the idea of being at a yoni university.
What inspired you to write the song, specifically the song, Do the Kegel?
Well, I have to say it was my mom.
Really?
Yes. When I was pregnant with my son, I was pregnant quite late, in my later 30s, and he's my only child. My mom wrote to me and said, you must do your pelvic floor exercises. And to be honest, I didn't at that point. I had actually not heard of pelvic floor exercises, so I'd gone a long way through life without discovering that they even existed. Mm-hmm. So she said 1 in 3 postmenopausal women are incontinent because of their pelvic floor issues. And so she gave me this basic information, which I hadn't had already. And at the time, I was singing with a women's choir, and we used to write sort of feminine empowering songs of various sorts. And I thought, right, I need something that's going to stick in my brain to keep me remembering to do these exercises. And that's why I wrote the song, because I thought, right, a little song, one of those little wormy songs that kind of gets in your brain and you can't get it out, is going to do the job. So that's how Do the Kegel arose, all due to my dear old mum.
Well, I'm going to play a bit of that song.
There's an exercise that every woman needs. It's called the Kegel, the pelvic squeeze. It's great at any age. Let's make it all the rage. It's good for you. It's fun.
You're from the UK originally, but lived in Australia?
That's correct. I often say I'm British by birth and Australian by choice.
Oh, that's lovely. So you must have heard a lot of different ways that people have pronounced the word Kegel.
Yes, I have. And again, I've sort of just adopted mine, and I hear that many more people, I think, in the US say Kegel. Mm-hmm. But I've gone with mine in the same way as I have my idiosyncratic pronunciation of yoni. Same with Kegel. I started with Kegel and I've stuck with Kegel.
What do you hear most frequently in the UK and in Australia?
Do you know, in Australia, they really don't know what a Kegel is. That it's not a familiar. They know about pelvic floor squeezes, but they don't have that word. So I often have to educate people about that to start with. In the UK, a little bit more familiarity with that term, but actually I think it's really a very much US-based term. That's where people have real familiarity with it.
Interesting. Each episode of this podcast, we're going to be taking a Kegel break.
I love it.
So would you care to talk us through 3 or 4 Kegel that we can use during our exercise in this episode?
Okay.
And we will do them along with you.
All right. So there's some tricks with the Kegel that are important to realize. So maybe I'll just speak about that beforehand, and then we can move into actually doing them together. And there are different ways of doing Kegels, and there are different varieties. But one thing I feel is really important is to get connected with your sits bones. And they're the bones you're probably familiar with, that most of the time we sit on. And a great way to get connected if you're sitting down is just to rock from side to side and feel for the bony areas that are most in contact with the seat or the cushion that you're sitting on.
Okay, I'm doing
And
that.
then, okay, so we're rocking from side to side.
Mm-hmm.
And then imagine a line between those two bones. So we're feeling for or imagining a line that's almost, it's really going through the perineum, which is one of the parts of the body we're going to really work with. When we Kegel, we're actually wanting to lift the perineum. So if you can sense that area, that line, and those two bones, then we're really wanting to actually lift the area in between. That's one of the primary goals of the Kegel. And then the other thing to consider is the breath. And people do this in different ways, but my recommendation is that you actually do the squeeze or the lift on the out breath. And why I suggest that is because on the in breath, the natural body movement is outwards. As we breathe in, the belly goes gently out, and so does the perineum, so does the base of the body. So you might want to start by actually just doing that, just noticing an in breath and the relaxation out of the base of the body, and then the out breath. And that's when the natural rise comes. So I'm going to suggest that we breathe in and then squeeze and lift the perineum on the out breath. And what you can do as you continue to breathe in and relax and then squeeze and lift on the out breath, you can imagine that line and those two sits bones just gently pulling together on the out breath, and then just gently relaxing apart on the in breath. So going out and squeezing and in and relaxing. Because one of the really important things about doing the Kegel is that we relax as well as lifting. For some women, it's not even it's not so much the tension that's important, but the relaxation.
That's counterintuitive to me, the in and the out and the relaxation and the tension. But okay, I'm going to give it a shot.
Yes, and it is counterintuitive, and it does work against how some people teach it. And at the bottom line, squeezing whatever way is better than not squeezing at all. So if this just doesn't work for you, just go back to the way you've been doing it before.
Okay, walk us through a couple.
Okay, so breathing in and relaxing the base of the body. And then breathing out and imagining the perineum rising up, squeezing the muscles in, and then breathing in to relax. Open, breathing out and imagining those two bones coming together, the perineum rising up, sucking up into the body, breathing in, relaxing open, breathing out and drawing the perineum up into the body, and then breathing in again and relaxing completely.
Wow. Okay. That's going to take a little practice. But it's kind of neat because it's counterintuitive. I had to engage my mind a bit, and it made me more mindful and conscious as I was doing it.
Awesome.
Oh, that's wonderful. Is there anything else that you would like to add?
You're talking specifically about for the older woman, aren't you? For our age and beyond. Is that correct?
Exactly.
It seems that a lot of people, a lot of women that I work with come to me with concerns about what's going to happen to their sexuality post-menopause. And there is a huge myth, I believe, in our culture that really once the hormones are kind of dwindling in the menopausal state, that a woman's sexuality is all over Red Rover. And I really want to start to spread the word that is absolutely not the case. In fact, many of the people that I know, myself included, have found that post-menopause, our sexual experience, yes, changes, but becomes, I would have to say, better than ever. That's my experience. And I know that I'm not alone. And there are some facts that may help a woman when she's considering this. The one key thing is that your libido, which is, if your libido is based on your hormonal production, that may well go through a bit of a change as your hormones change. That's natural. But our libido, our hormones are not just produced in one area. There are quite a number of hormones, like estrogen is produced in a localized way within the vagina. And if a woman is, for instance, suffering from dryness due to a less estrogen production, that can be changed doing something like working with the Taoist jade egg. This is a really valuable tool that women can use. It's a crystal egg that can be worked with intervaginally, and just presence of the egg in the vagina stimulates the production of more estrogen and can make a woman's lubrication return or remain. So that's one kind of specific issue that some women have, and one particular way that can be solved. But it also changes our sometimes it changes the lack of estrogen does change the tissues within the vagina, makes them a little bit thinner. Simple answer to that is, if there is an issue with that, is using more lubrication, actually using external lubrication, and there are many different types of lube that one can use. And I think it's a question of not judging oneself, going, oh no, I have to resort to something that's outside of me. It's not that you're any different, your stage of life is slightly different, but there's no shame or no issue with helping the body along. We do it in so many other ways. So, and the other thing I'd like to say is that often what women find is when their sexuality is less driven by the hormonal flow, the ebb and flow of hormones, it can become a much more heart-oriented experience. So women can find that if they approach their erotic nature through their heart, through tenderness, through a loving relationship, either with their partner or with their own body, then they can discover a completely new flavor of sexuality. And it really is, it just simply is not true that once we get past these childbearing years, that sex is not something that's, I think, important and valuable and a beautiful experience, because really our sexual energy is our life force energy. And for me, that gives even more of an impetus to keep moving with it into our later years, because quite literally, I believe we'll probably live longer and happier lives if we continue to explore our sexuality as long as we are able.
How beautiful. The title of this podcast is Our Better Half, referring to the second half of life perhaps being our better one. Would you agree with that?
I think I would. I mean, they often say youth is wasted on the young. And I must say, when I look at how I feel about that, it's like I was so preoccupied with so many things about what other people thought when I was young that I did miss so much of the delights of being in a very young and healthy body. And these days, I just feel so liberated because I am not so concerned, and I feel more empowered in myself. I feel like I know who I am, and I know what I want and what's right and wrong in my world. And that gives me so much freedom that I must say, I was used to say life began at 40. It really felt like it for me. And that would probably be an average lifespan, the beginning of the second half of my life. And for me, it really is the better half. So yes, I agree absolutely, Laura.
Oh, that's absolutely a wonderful note to go out on. Thank you so much, Laura Doe. This has been really fantastic.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Healthy habits. Squeeze and squeeze some more. Very healthy habits.
It's time for a serious health warning. You know how you write your passwords on Post-it notes and encrypt your login codes? We all know how it is. You get older, you forget things. You find some clever place to hide your PIN numbers from others, and then you can't decode your own cipher. Well, you need to prioritize another crucial security issue. Make extra copies of your chastity belt key. I'll tell you why. Earlier this month, a 60-year-old woman in Padua, Italy, presented herself to the local fire station with a problem. She had lost the key to her chastity belt. Yes, reportedly an iron chastity belt. And when I say reported, I mean repeated and repeated throughout the internet without additional reportage, but with much glee. I know you thought that chastity belts were archaic items of the middle-aged patriarchy, meant to preserve feminine virtue and fidelity, but apparently some catalog somewhere is still selling them, or this gentlewoman's family has trouble throwing things out, but she did not complain of being forced to wear it. It was voluntary. The firefighters, apparently initially flummoxed by the situation, still rose to the occasion and, quote, quickly, unquote, freed her. Italian men, we expected no less. Porn producers, your storyline awaits you. I just looked at eBay. Do not look. Just joking, I know you will. Chastity belts are back, but they don't look very chaste at all. And most are for the fellas, not for the ladies. But here's the thing. Medieval chastity belts weren't actually a thing. Just as we're laughing about this story now, depictions of these devices and even the museum items we've seen displayed are probably symbolic and humorous, not a real practice. Even the formidable objet de chastité in the British Museum is labeled a fake. In other words, the chastity belt that we so love to decry was more aspirational than functional and was meant to project virtuous intent, like my upstairs vacuum cleaner. Frankly, the hygiene of that era would have been ardor-reducing enough for me, but any teenager in a small backseat can tell you that if there's a will, there's a way, and iron contraptions that are snug enough to prevent things going in would present practical problems for all daily functions. The quest to keep the wrong penises out of the right vaginas is the stuff of legend and art and is infamously difficult. It puts a whole new spin on lockjaw, though. Who's getting busy over 50 this week? Julie Dreyfus, the French actress, not Julia Louis-Dreyfus, who started having sex after 50 in January 2011, gets busy over 50 starting this week. Donald McIntyre, Irish investigative journalist, will be gathering data on sex over 52. Maxim Dlugi, chess grandmaster who must have serious game, will too. Umar Alisha, Indian spiritual leader, and Lars Petter Holt, Norwegian trance DJ, will both be doing it tantric, we assume. Englishman Gordon Hill, YouTube star known as the Wealdstone Raider, has got no fans, but we hope he gets some for his birthday. Imelda Pappen, world music singer and politician, turning 60. Tim Flannery, Australian scientist and, as the leader of the Australian Climate Commission, surely an expert on what is and what is not hot, turning 60. American journalist Susan L. Taylor, turning 70. She should look up Armando Salas, erotic cartoonist from Spain, also turning 70. And doing it over 80 for the first time this week, Alan Alda, the MASH actor, who went on to define the feminist male, and whose real name, by the way, is way sexier. Alfonso Joseph de Bruzel. In the next episodes, we'll celebrate Valentine's Day with asexuals. We'll wonder whether Mrs. Hughes and Mr. Carson talk any more during sex than they did about it. Meet a couple who faced a sexual medical crisis and are now having the best sex of their lives. We'll hear from someone named Pepper and ask the question of what's scarier, talking about sex or sex while fat. For links and people discussed in this podcast, visit our website at ourbetterhalf.net. Don't forget to subscribe by putting your email in the form on the site or through iTunes or your favorite podcasting app. Old people, how long has it been since you had a good orgasm? Did you know that more women report faking orgasms than having orgasms during sex? You're in charge of your own pleasure, my friends. Go have a lovely orgasm. And I'll talk to you next week.
I wouldn't want you to think that I'd inveigled you into an arrangement which was not what you'd expected.
I would never think that.